everyone, so today we're going to be going over how to multiply monomials and polynomials using the distributive property. So the first thing I want to go over is just a little distributive property review. So remember, when we're distributing, we're going to multiply what is directly outside of the parentheses to everything that is inside the parentheses. So in our example, we have 3 times open parentheses 4x squared plus 7x minus 1 close parentheses. So I have this little blue line here because I want to show the work on that side, and I'm going to write my answer underneath our example. So I'm going to circle what's outside my parentheses, which is this positive 3, and I'm going to distribute that to everything that's inside the parentheses. So I'm going to be multiplying. So I'm going to do the multiplication on this other side of the line. So we have 3 times 4x squared. Now, this 3 does not have an x, right? So we are just multiplying our coefficients, our big numbers here. So 3 times 4, and when I say big, I mean actually like in size. Like this, I'm considering a small number, so I'm not going to multiply that to anything. So I'm just multiplying the coefficients here and the bases. So 3 times 4 is 12, and then x squared, we're not doing anything with it, so it's going to be 12x squared. So I'm going to just write that as my first term. Now, 3 times 7x, because now we're distributing to the second part of this polynomial. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to multiply my coefficients. 3 times 7 is 21. We're going to leave x alone, but it has to come with it. Now, that's a positive 21x, so I'm going to just write that right next to my first term. So we have 12x squared plus 21x. And now this last term, we have 3 times, now I know that that's a minus 1, but I want you to treat that like a negative 1 here. 3 times negative 1, a positive times a negative is negative. Anything times 1 is itself, so that's going to give us negative 3, and then that's going to go last. Now this negative 1 did not have an x, so we don't have to put an x after this negative 3. We're only including x's where they appear. So everything is in standard form. We can't combine anything, so we know that this is our final answer. So all I did was take 3 and multiply it to everything inside the parentheses. Let's take a look at another example. So here we're multiplying monomials and polynomials. So when you are multiplying a monomial and a polynomial, you're going to distribute, which means multiply, to the term on the outside of the parentheses to everything on the inside, just like we did in the slide before this. However, you have to make sure you multiply coefficients and add exponents of like variables. So in the last example, that 3 that we distributed did not have a variable. And we can see in this example that we do have a variable. So this says negative 3x times 2x squared minus 4. So what we're going to be doing is we're taking this negative 3x and we're distributing it. We're going to be multiplying it to the 2 terms inside our parentheses. So same thing, I'm going to show the work on this other side of the line. So we have negative 3x times 2x squared. We're going to multiply our coefficients, so we're multiplying those numbers in front. So negative 3 times 2 gives us 6. And we have to add the exponents of our like variables. So here we have an x by itself, which means that there's an exponent of 1. So we're going to add these exponents together. 1 plus 2 gives us 3, so that gives us 6x to the 3rd power. So that's going to be my first term and my final answer. Now I'm going to multiply this negative 3x times, now we're going to treat that minus 4 like a negative 4. Okay, that is supposed to be a multiplication sign. Let me just fix that real quick. Okay. So a negative times a negative is going to be positive. 3 times 4 is 12. Now this minus 4 doesn't have an x, but this minus 3x does. So that means we just bring that x over. We don't add any exponents because we don't have any exponents to add to it. You're going to just leave it alone. And that's going to be the second term in our final answer. I'm looking at my answer and I'm double checking my work, and I see that I made a mistake. Hopefully, along the way, one of you guys caught this mistake. In this first part, it's negative 3x to the first power times, so I'm talking about this first part, times 2x to the second. A negative times a positive is negative. So this should be a -6. So this should be a -6. So that's why I always want to go back and I want to check to make sure that I did everything correct. So everything else looks correct. I'm going to put my final answer in a box and keep moving forward. Okay, so here's an example where we have more than one variable, which happens sometimes. So we need to know exactly how to approach these examples. So we're going to do the same thing where we're going to take the entire term and distribute it to the 3 terms inside the parentheses. So even though we have a lot of numbers and variables in that first term, it's still only one term. So I'm going to show my work over here. We have 6xy squared times -3x squared y to the 3rd. So a lot of stuff going on here. Now the first thing I want to focus on is my coefficients. So we have 6 times -3. That's going to give us -18. Now we add the exponents of like variables here. So we have an x and we have a y. X and y are not like variables, so you cannot add exponents of an x and a y. You have to add exponents of 2 x's and 2 y's, and I'll show you what I mean. So this first x doesn't have an exponent, so we know it has an invisible 1. So that is what I'm going to add to my other exponent of that same variable. So as long as it's the same variable, you can add those exponents. 1 plus 2 gives me 3, so I have x to the 3rd power here. Notice I did not look at the numbers in front. I did not look at the exponents of the y's. That is completely separate. Now I can go ahead and add my exponents of y's because they are a different variable. So that's going to give me y to the 5th power. So in my answer, my first term is going to be -18 x to the 3rd, y to the 5th. Now let's multiply our second term. So we have 6xy squared times 6y. Okay, 6 times 6 gives me a positive 36. And then notice that in this term, this second term here, we don't have an x, but we have an x here. So if this term, the second term, does not have an x, you have nothing to multiply it to. So that means you're going to leave your x alone. Don't add any exponents because there's nothing to add it to. So this is going to be 36x. Now if you want to, write in your little invisible exponent over there, and we're going to add the exponents of the y variable. So 2 plus 1 is going to give us y to the 3rd power. So that's going to be the second term here. Now it's positive, so I'm going to put plus. Don't forget those plus and minus signs. Those are very important. Y to the 3rd. And now for our last term, we have 6xy squared times, now treat that like a -4x. And this is just that's a multiplication symbol, just so we know. Okay, so 6 times -4 is going to give me -24. These x's have invisible exponents of 1. And when I add those together, that's going to give me 2. So I'm going to get x squared. And now, this second term right here does not have a y, but this one does. So just like we did before, if it does not have a like variable, you're going to leave it alone. So we're just going to bring down that y squared. So I'm going to write that at the end over here. -24 x squared y squared. And I'm always just going to double check my work. Does everything look right? Did I have the right signs and symbols? Did I add the correct exponents? And as I'm checking it, everything looks good. So please make sure you look over your answers before you just submit. Oh, let me just go back here. Okay. All right, let's look at one more example. So here it says find the product of 1/2 x and 2x squared minus 4x plus 3. So I see a key word here, which is product. Whenever we see the word product, we know that that means to multiply. So what we need to do is multiply 1/2 x and 2x squared minus 4x plus 3. So remember, multiplication is just something outside parentheses, right? That's how we can write multiplication. And that tells us that we are going to be distributing whenever I have something outside the parentheses like that. So I'm going to take this 1/2 and I'm going to multiply it by everything inside the parentheses. Now, please do not be afraid of fractions. We're going to see that when we deal with fractions, they're really not as bad as you think, especially when we're multiplying. So we have 1/2 x times 2x squared. And now, if you don't remember, I'm going to just create this little bubble over here. If you don't remember how to multiply fractions, 1/2 times 2. We can write 2 as a fraction. If you remember, any whole number we can just put over 1, and it becomes a fraction. And then from there, we just multiply straight across. We get 2 over 2, which gives us 1. So I just want to do a quick refresher on that. So if you want to, you can put this over 1, and you know you're going to just be multiplying straight across. So like I said, that gives us 2 over 2. Now don't forget to add your exponents for the x. That gives us x to the third, which is just going to give us x to the third. We know that there's that invisible 1 there, but we don't really need that. And on the regent, they're not going to put it in that form. Okay, so 1/2 times 2 gave us 2 over 2, which is 1. And then we added the exponents of the x's here, and that gave us 3. Let's do this second part now. We have 1/2 x times negative 4x. If it makes you feel more comfortable, put this over 1 and then multiply straight across. 1 times negative 4 gives me negative 4 over 2 times 1, which gives us 2. Add your exponents here. 1 plus 1 is going to give us 2, so that gives us squared. Now I'm going to simplify this fraction here. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. I'm going to just bring down that. Oh, that should be x to the second power. Okay, let's finish this up. Let's do this last part where we have 1/2 x times 3. Put it over 1. Multiply the top, multiply the bottom. 1 times 3 gives me 3 over 2 times 1 gives me 2. And now we don't have any exponents to add because this 3 does not have a variable, so I'm going to just bring over this x. Now, you can ask yourself, can I simplify 3 over 2? Can 2 go into 3 evenly? No. So you can leave it as a fraction or you can write it as a decimal. In this case, I'm going to just leave it as a simplified fraction. I can't simplify it any further, so I'm going to just leave it alone. So now I'm going to just bring over my entire answer, which is x to the third minus 2x squared plus 3 over 2x. It's in standard form. I can't add anything together, so I know that I'm done. All right, so how about you try a couple on your own?